Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Here we are, another episode of Isolation Inspiration. This time we are with Lewis Stevens, and he's got some amazing stories of a 5,000-mile bike ride. I mean, I've been on some bike rides in my time. I've done London to Brighton, which, to put it into perspective, is about 52 miles. So it's an incredible feat. It was all for charity. Lewis, can you tell us, where did this all begin?
Well, it began in Chelsea Bill in terms of the bike ride, but mentally, I suppose it began with, a bit of an unrest about what I was doing and where I was at the age I was. I was only 23, but I've always felt like I wanted to be out and experience it as much as I can while I'm able to. And this trip, after many other small coincidences, basically turned out to be the biggest one yet. But no, it was good.
It's amazing. Tell me about the bike tour, because I mean, I understand that you went with very little money, although you were raising money for a charity. You actually went with very little money in your pocket.
Yeah, I mean, this fits in from something I've always tried to travel cheap. So when I was younger, when I was about 17, I went to Europe, about 18 maybe, with about 700 quid in my pocket, and I went straight to Barcelona, and I managed to last 5 or 6 months on that money, getting by and volunteering and doing different schemes. So working and traveling has always been a big part of what I sort of enjoy doing. And and then basically loads of little things all worked out, and then I ended up doing the bike tour on it was originally £5 a day I wanted to survive on, and then when I got up to Scotland, as I was enjoying it so much, we decided to move it on to £1 a day for 20 days to see if I could survive all the way through. And I managed to do it.
How do you do that on a pound? What do you spend your pound on? Where does that go?
It was usually a coffee, I think. But what I'd do is I'd walk into a cafe with my pound, and I'd say, I'm willing to spend this pound. And they would talk to me about what I was doing. And eventually, well, every time people would just end up going, have it, or mate, or somebody else in the cafe would have to pay for it, etc.
Yeah. And we should point out that this was for charity. This is for a male suicide charity, right?
So for the charity Calm, so I've got the T-shirt here, and that's Campaign Against Living Miserably, which is a male suicide prevention charity. And the sort of idea behind the pound a day was to encourage asking for help, which is what the charity sort of endorses anybody that's in trouble. So I had to mentally and physically face up to sort of against your pride and just walk in and ask people for free things and say, look, I really need it in this time of my life. And everybody obliged the whole way around.
Amazing. Tell us about the bike ride.
Right, so it started off in Chelsea Bill. I went clockwise through to Cornwall and up towards Wales, up to Scotland. And then when I went to Scotland, I jumped onto the Isle of Arran, onto the next isle, then to the Isle of Harris and Lewis, then came over to Oban, down back round Loch Lomond, all the way up to the top to John O'Groats, and then I come back down all the way there. It was on a 1972 Claude Butler vintage bicycle with 40-kilogram trailer on the back and pannier racks, and I lived on, when I could, pasta and sauce and a sleeping bag and a tent. That was
amazing.
Yeah.
I've got a message just come in from Ben Rample. He's saying, what was the nicest thing someone gifted you during the bike ride?
Okay, so there was a night in Long Sutton where I was on an A road and it got on pitch black, and I spotted a Holy McDonald's in the distance, which means free phone charge and etc. So these were like my hubs. I knew I could survive here. And we basically decided to put a big social media campaign out about 7 p.m. And it got loads of responses. First of all, a mother and a daughter turned up, bought me a McDonald's and said, wait here, we'll be back in 20 minutes.
Wow, well, just a random stranger.
A random stranger. Then another stranger called Damo turned up with a mobile phone and said, just so you don't run out of phone battery again, here's a mobile phone. Then the mum and the daughter turned back up with about 3 bags worth of shopping that I could barely even carry. Then a local pub called me and offered me a free room for the night. And amongst other things. Oh, and then the McDonald's boss came over and gave me a free donut, which was nice. And I got a free room. And then the next day, BBC called me up and we did a little interview outside, and it got thousands of views, and it really, really felt like the whole community got behind it, which was really awesome.
Amazing. What was the scariest part?
Scary. Well, the first night was probably on my own was the scariest part. Maybe
was this outdoors?
This is I camped most nights, and it's all wild camping. And I found myself in between 2 abandoned farmyards and like farmhouses. And it was just the first night wild camping, and I'm laying in my my sleeping bag is, and something's obviously jumped over my metal camping cooking equipment like a rat or something, and that was it. I didn't sleep. I laid there hugging my phone, listening to a podcast for like 3 hours, but I survived it.
What time of the year was it?
Started in January, February. I think it was March. I think I started, and it was 4 months. So the first month I remember it being quite raining and cold, but then I got Wales was glorious sunshine. Scotland treated me okay, and then the last sort of coming down was quite windy, and it turned. I experienced all weather really.
Yeah. And why did you choose the charity Calm? Why was that specifically the one that you?
So previously I'd done a bike ride for them called Bike to Festival, which was Bournemouth to a music festival, and if you raised the money for the ticket, you got to go for free, and we all joined a little like gang, and that was where I first became aware of Calm. But then just, I mean, obviously the it's the biggest killer of men under 45, and it's just obviously one of the hugest problems that we aren't focusing on. We are focusing on now, I think, and I think we've got to a point where it's really cool for men to talk about their problems, but it's not so easy for us to deal with them. I don't think we're really wired to sort of like talk.
Yeah, we don't open up. Yeah,
we don't open up as easy, even though we know we can now. Okay, I'm ready to open up, and then okay, how do I do it? Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
and this is what this charity is offering you, and they offer you they've got a free web chat service. They've got support for families who have suffered, who are suffering because of it, because you don't get rid of the pain, you just move the pain. That's what they say when somebody unfortunately takes their life. So that was the reason for the charity. So yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. It's a big deal, I think.
Yeah. Now I know you're a bit of a tech geek. So how did the online world aid the trip?
Right. So imagine this. So imagine every night you're cycling every day. You've got a little camera and tripod, and you're setting it up, and you're recording, you're vlogging. You get back, and all you want to do is chill. But then I was sitting in my tent till about 2 a.m. editing vlogs and videos to put onto my YouTube channel. And then I was in a cafe at 7 a.m. the next morning borrowing their Wi-Fi so I could upload it. And then we took advantage of social media to every community we got to really to get the support and the help we needed, which is, for me, highlights how we can be using social media in a better way, which was another sort of thing we wanted to promote on the trip. And that was just amazing. You know, like we were just posting, and people were just reaching out and doing what they had, or even just a simple share. And that was pretty much what got me around the country. I think without using social media, I wouldn't have made it around, to be honest.
Well, you wouldn't have had any money, would you? So it would have been difficult to eat or drink or anything.
Yeah, it was just that, like, I suppose it was just the support that you got every time. Like, you'd get somewhere after a hard day and check your emails, and 3 people have offered you a place to stay. There's a free meal here for you, and this, and this. And the coolest thing is no one said no all the way around. You know,
how did the BBC get involved? How did they hear about it? Via the social media channel?
So one of the Long Sutton story I said, where everyone was helping me out, I posted a thank you video later on just before I went in the pub, which got like 10,000 views, I think all from Long Sutton. And then BBC called me up the next morning and said, do you mind coming on? So yeah, no worries. And I had 2 or 3 interviews with the BBC on the way around. I did a lot of radio interviews in Scotland. I was very, very lucky to have a friend called James who was trying to break through into the PR world. So he was like my eye in the sky the whole way around. So I'd get somewhere and I'd call him up at the end. He'd say, right, you've got an interview here, an interview here. You got to go and see this person here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it was a really, really unique experience on top of the bike ride.
Yeah. And what about crashes? You must have crashed loads of times.
I crashed once, I think.
Is that all?
Yeah, once, and it was a simple slip, and I only had 1 puncture as well the whole way around, believe that or not. But it crashed. It was really, I can remember it was 2 pathways slipping, and I sort of went this way and decided to take the other one last minute and came off, and then the trailer on the back of the bike toppled over, and that was it. I went with it, but apart from that.
So you mentioned the nice experiences you had. You must have had some harrowing or scary ones as well on your own in all those miles.
Yeah. The one that springs to mind there is, do you know, what was this place in Scotland where you can get married really young?
Gretna Green.
I was coming towards Gretna Green, like, I had a problem with the bike, and it was about 11 p.m. and I was cycling through this really dark, and I was going, I knew I was going to cross the border to Scotland soon, and I just suddenly started getting all these things hit my face, and I was like, what is this? And I realised I'd come into loads of midges. It's about the season for the midges in Scotland, and they were back and everywhere and things like that. And I remember thinking, this is really dangerous, and I didn't have any water or anything like that. So that was one of the ones where I was quite nervous. But do you know what? You're never really alone with phones and social media, are you? So I was ended up just making more of a joke of it and filming myself being scared.
Yeah, I think we've all found that since lockdown, haven't we? That actually, you know, if you want to put yourself out there like us now, you know, we actually socially meeting's really difficult. But if you know what to do, you get on Zoom, you can meet your friends, you can still feel connected, can't you?
Yeah, and that's what this lockdown's done for everybody, I think. It's opened up a world that a lot of people were maybe ignoring or maybe weren't aware of or realised that you are capable of doing. So off the back is like the big thing we promoted during the bike tour was community. We were all about community. And you see now there's local communities forced because of the lockdown to use all these things that we knew we had anyway, but just make people aware of what's possible with all this social media stuff. And hopefully it moves people's attention away from the negative mental arguing and back and forth that seems to be plaguing a lot of these resources, and open up to what potentially it could be, if you know what I mean.
Definitely. And you mentioned a really surreal experience where you fell off your bike and bumped into some people.
So I was in the valleys in Scotland, in Wales, and it was a really sunny day. It was Cycle Route 7, I think it was, because I followed those all the way around. And I'd been, and the sun was going down. I had no water or anything, and I put my bike, and I was like, there was a lot of these moments. What am I going to do next? So I'm going to stand in there, and as I said, I've just seen these two figures in the distance sort of walk towards me, carrying something large on their back. What is that? As they get closer and closer to me, they realised they were carrying a giant cross, like a Christian figure cross on their back. And they said to me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm doing this, the male suicide prevention." And they said, "I hope you don't mind, Lewis, but we actually both got into Christianity because we felt suicidal. Is it okay if we do a prayer for you?" So yeah, okay, in the middle. So they put their cross down, got down on one knee each, and I stood upright. I didn't know the etiquette behind this, and they prayed for me. Yeah, they murmured something, and they said, "Right, we'll wish you on your way now." And 15 minutes later, I came across a golf club, and I walked into this golf club, and the guy called Ollie was behind the bar. He said, "Oh, don't worry, mate, you can stay at mine tonight." So he gave me the keys to his flat. I went back to his. And then ended up taking me out, and I had the best night of my life because I was feeling quite lonely. That I'd been away for about a month and a half, hadn't seen anyone, and he took me to a party with all his friends, and we was up to the early hours, and I just had the best night, and it really sort of like rejuvenated me. And I was saying to everyone, "I think I'm converted."
But it's an extraordinary story of kindness of strangers. I mean, because it's quite gutsy, I think, for you to walk into places and say, "Can you help me?" That's not an easy thing to do, and it goes against the grain a little bit, doesn't it, for most of us? So that must have been really tricky. Was anyone sort of really? Was there a lot of no? Sorry,
no one said no. Do you know what? It's funny because everybody I met that had told them about the charity, they knew someone that had been affected by suicide, basically, and it was just nothing but like real understanding. And I find out, especially as you get around to there's a big problem with it in the farming industry and things like this, where these jobs are like where it's full of isolation. Because I was around a lot of those experiences, people, "Oh yeah, we know someone in the village who has just done it, or someone's affected." There was nothing but sympathy, and people really wanted to help. Like beyond, do you know what? It got to an uncomfortable position where I was so confident I was going to get help that it became sort of slightly strange, and I didn't want to, but I just knew. And if it wasn't coming, I become impatient with it. Do you know what I mean? So it was quite bizarre in that respect, but it was too much help.
Now tell us about. I know that you're a broadcaster. You work for the hospital radio station, which is great. Something I used to do in my youth, so I know all about that. And it's a wonderful thing to do, I think. But it's also off the back of that, you've now got a podcast, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the podcast is called "Why Aren't You Normal?" Epsom, and it's all about challenging sort of what people are expecting you to do, basically. So if I get a guest on with an alternate hobby, career, pastime, anything like that, if they want to come on and talk about it and talk about the journey of how they got there, because nobody got there the way that you'd imagine society would expect you to get there. Do you know what I mean? So as a result of when I went to Europe when I was younger, as I said to you, after that, one of the houses I stayed at, the woman encouraged me to do a ski season. She said, "Go out and earn." So I did that ski season. And then while I was in the ski season, a guest left a book called "One Man and His Bike." And it was about a guy who cycled around the United Kingdom. So I decided I wanted to cycle around the United Kingdom. Cycle around the United Kingdom, I had an idea for the podcast. I remember the road. And I remember thinking, so my story and my belief is you don't need to do it the way that people are telling you to do if that's not making you feel comfortable. So we try and get people on with those kind of stories, and it's Epsom Hospital Radio sponsored. So I do it in their studio. We get different guests on every week to talk about this sort of stuff, and yeah, it's just a really, really mad thing. It's just, yeah, I can't really describe it.
No, I know what you mean. I think, quite often we look at people and I think, especially as older people, there's a tendency to try and identify someone by maybe their occupation, which for most of us doesn't define us at all.
No.
It's just what we happen to do to make our living. But actually, when you dig beneath the surface, you find that, Lewis is not just a chef, but he's also someone that's just been around the world or whatever it is. And, it's incredible how when you take the time to dig beneath the surface, I find everyone's got an interesting story just lying there waiting to come out.
And that's the whole sort of ethos of the podcast. It's like, why aren't you normal? Oh, we don't believe anybody's normal. We believe everybody's got a unique story to how they got where they were. And the podcast format is brilliant because it isn't 2-minute sound bites. It's an hour or 45 minutes or an hour and a half, where you can really discuss. So even now the first 20 minutes of an interview can feel quite scary, but when you forget the microphones on and the cameras on and you're really relaxes,
always the best.
You get some really interesting insights, to how they think and how they feel. And I know it from first-hand experience when I felt low and confused. Listening to a podcast with two of my favourite people, I felt rejuvenated afterwards. There was something, listening to their story was so inspiring. And I have a bit, I think my natural talents sort of lie in talking, funny enough. But I want to just make sure I grasp that, and I've always known that was I was sort of talent and skill. And there's no real course for that, at uni, or there's no real course for life. So I've always tried to do what made me feel comfortable. And my advice out there would be a lot of people that told me when I was first traveling to Europe or doing my ski season, stop wasting your time. When are you going to get a real job? But I've always sort of just done this, and it's ended up somewhere now where I really see a future, and it took a lot of years of not feeling good feeling good what I was doing, but getting a lot of pushback. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I love podcasts, and I think we consume podcasts in a very different way from video. For me, I'll whack a podcast on and then start driving. That's what I do. So I consume it in a different way. And I love the fact that it takes me somewhere different. It's like reading a book. It really captures and fires the imagination. Whereas if you've got video, there's a different dimension to it. But I do particularly like the longer format of podcasts, and I devour them all day, every day. So
the word I like to use with podcasts is marinating. I think you marinate on a podcast. You don't listen to it. Your brain sits there and you let the information go around. You can't take on so much, but you sort of let it wash over you, and you just start to get a sense and a real feel for the person. It's not like a cleverly edited thing to push across something.
Definitely. Yeah. Now, you're known as the tourist dog. Is that how people can find your podcast?
Yes. If you want to have a podcast, you can type in Why Aren't You Normal Epsom on Google, because it had come up. We're on Spotify. I've got a website called waynepodcast.com. If anybody's out there watching, I really, really beg you to go on there and subscribe to the email that we send out every episode, because you get a short write-up of whoever has been on, some of the latest stuff to do with the podcast. And it's just good advertising. It's just a good way for me to reach out to people.
Yeah. And what can we expect? What's coming up on the Tourist Dog?
There's some secret, quite big ones that I've got in the pipeline that I want to keep quiet for now. But I mean, if you go back and listen to series 1, we had Oliver Adams, who's a professional rugby player, and he talked about the realistic sustainability of careers in sport. So having to realise, okay, is this going to be sort of good for me in the long term? That was a really great chat. And he was a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for years. So I think there was a good sort of catching up. We had a guy, Joey Knight, who is the Queensbury regional boxing champion, 7-0. He came on and talked about keeping himself fit and his passion for boxing. We had someone who runs the What's On in Epsom website, which is Paul, and he's got 24,000 followers on there. And they and what he does is he keeps everyone up to date with traffic news, etc., etc. And he started this at 54 after retiring, and now it's his job. So do you know what I mean? There's stories.
It's inspiring. It's inspiring, isn't it? And it makes you realise that it's not about invention. You can reinvent. You can be something, be doing something, and reinvent yourself in different ways, and that's always exciting.
Yeah, and it's all about how you approach everything. You start every day, how you start it quickly. Before I know we've got 20 minutes, but the thing I really realised on the bike tour was hills, climbing up hills. If you approach that hill with a positive attitude and you focus on it pedal at a time, you'll get up the hill a lot better than if you're just staring at the top.
You're absolutely right, Lewis. I said I went on that bike ride in China. Yeah. China's got a lot of mountains. Didn't know that till I went there. And when you see that tiny dot at the top of the mountain that's another cyclist, you think, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to make that? But actually, if you focus on 2 feet in front of that front wheel, all of a sudden you're at the top thinking, wow, I've done it. I'm there. Yeah. And that's the most incredible feeling.
I know. And that's something you can't learn that in a book. You can't learn in uni, or you can, but in different ways. You can't learn that in certain things. You learn these experiences the way you want to learn them. So you do things that you want to do, feel positive about what you're doing, and you will take a better lesson than this is what I think.
Right. Yeah, it's also a great metaphor for life, isn't it? You don't look at the big challenge. If you can't quite make it, actually, if you take it in bite-sized chunks, whatever it is, you'll crack it, but just take the bite-sized chunks. Don't look at the whole thing.
Yeah, if you focus on the top, this is just from the 1,000 hills I did. Focus at the top. That hill is way harder than if you focus on just one pedal at a time.
Absolutely.
A million times harder. And when you get to the top, you don't even feel good. You're just waiting for it to be over. If you push and you keep that momentum, you stay with yourself. When you get to the top, you're still with yourself, and then you enjoy that. You can enjoy that down.
Absolutely. And doesn't that down feel welcome? Lewis, it's been great talking to you. The Tourist Dog, everybody, thanks ever so much for coming on the show. It's been really inspirational.